Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues. With this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 3 of the anime series Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, and this was another spectacular episode. Just the things that they can fit into a 24-minute anime episode time slot. It's just pitch perfect. It's a pitch perfect example, as far as I'm concerned, in getting the most bang for your buck, in dramatic storytelling, in moving and engrossing characterization. This episode felt largely to me like watching a classic film, set against the backdrop of 1941, World War II, the onslaught of Japan striking America, and all of that stuff is going on in the background as this dramatic turn of characterization is unfolding before us. This rift and divide that is burgeoning between Bon and Shin because of Bon's own jealousy. Bon in his younger days being the modern-day Yakumo, recalling back to all of this. And it's just utmost engrossing. Not only the artistry of the Rakugo, which has been really the through line of keeping my interest in this series, but it's also the characterization. These characters are so relatable. Bon, probably more than anyone else, in his concept of just not having time enough to keep up with Rakugo and keep up with his life and his responsibilities and everything. He feels like a failure, and as soon as he sets his eyes on something new, something comes along to undermine him. In this case, it's a little bit grandiose in the sense of, here we have a world war unfolding, in the background. But the idea of the Rakugo artists censoring themselves and it becoming very much sort of uncouth and seen as something derogatory or explicit and all these kinds of things, and they have to dial back on all of that, it says a lot for the history of Japan, where they were in that mindset at the time. And to have, again, this character interplay between Bon and Shin, where Shin's own natural talents are really bothering Bon to utmost levels. As somebody who makes videos on YouTube, I've gone through this, where I've looked at other people that are seemingly more successful in doing content that is either on par or better than I could ever seemingly feel like I could hope to do, and there's a level of jealousy there, and Bon is very natural in feeling this, like, I'm just not good enough. I can't project well enough. The stories I'm choosing are not necessarily, at least according to Shin's advice, well befitting of his demeanor and how he performs and all this kind of stuff. And he's got to find a better way for himself, which is very much, once again, paralleling where we were in the first episode of the series in the modern sense. With Yotaro and all of that. And I kind of, one thing about this episode too that struck me was the OP. This is the first episode, as far as I can recall, where we had OP music and OP animation, and I thoroughly loved it. I loved the music and the, melody of it. It felt very befitting of the backdrop. But one thing I will largely say is, with all the characters that were being shown in it, I feel almost as though, that first episode was kind of a pilot, but the majority of the series is actually about the flashback. Whereas, are we ever going to follow up with Yotaro in the modern day again, and the modern Yakumo and all that kind of stuff? I don't know entirely. That might be something else along the lines of a second season or something like that. Not exactly sure. I mean, there's still room enough to wrap up this flashback story, which is engrossing, and I hope it doesn't go away anytime soon. But again, what brought me into the series was the modern day happenings where we began in episode 1. So I'm wondering if we will call back on that. And with all these different characters being shown in the OP and the ending animation as well, music of which is just befitting of the time and place setting as well, this sort of melancholy jazzy piece. Thoroughly love the music in this series, especially in the OP and ending, but it does lead me to suspect maybe the main characters are actually the flashback characters. So I don't know if we're going to flash forward again or not. But suffice to say, this is a story about a girl, at least for a chunk of the episode, where Bon inadvertently meets this girl, Chio, and the way he meets her, she kind of stumbles in playing the shamisen and everything, and because her fingers are sore, and we see that Bon, his natural melodic talents, his ear for melody, and just skills, adaptability, playing instrumentation. It allows him to play this shamisen in her place. And so a friendship, kind of begins between them, blossoms between them. And I got to admit, I was actually thinking, oh, geez, is this going to be sort of the cliche thing where because Shin's the sort of horny party animal guy, is he going to see her and make his move on her? And then there's going to be a falling out between them. Nothing of the sort happened, thankfully. It was much more dramatic in, again, how the backdrop was affecting circumstances. They started seeing each other because he was a lower artisan and everything like that. They could not be witnessed together. They had to keep it secret, sneaking about and everything like that, until finally, family concerns drew her away. And it just seems like it's one beat after another where Bon is feeling defeatist. He's feeling like he can't succeed at anything, even meeting a girl and trying to have a relationship and all these things. He can't even be concerned with that because of his passion for his artistry, but also his responsibilities. It's just not going to work out. And this is something that's later visited upon him when his master, for all intents and purposes, decides, with the war becoming full mast, they're going to go to Manchuria. He's going to take Shin with him because Shin is clearly the better performer at this point. And again, to speak to that defeatist nature in Bon, he actually sort of, snaps back at his master. He's like, why am I not good enough? What is wrong with you? Why are you doing this to me? He feels oppressed. He feels like he's a lost cause. He feels like he's being abandoned and betrayed once again. And of course, his master wants to send him to the country with his wife to take care of her. And I love that sort of, pinky swear moment between Shin and Bon. Because Bon is just, he doesn't want to be left alone. For all of the jealousy he feels in Shin's performing capability, he loves the guy. They're brothers. They've been growing up together, raised together. They have been studying this artistry together. Through Bon's own sort of internal, investigation of how he's feeling, he both loves and hates Rakugo because of Shin. It's a mutual love and hate thing. It's a, sort of harsh mistress to him because he sees what he wishes he could be in Shin, but he's also inspired to be that in the first place by looking at Shin. And it's just so touching and heartwarming, that goodbye. And it's hilarious too because he requests Shin to do some Rakugo performances, and this is what puts him to sleep. And he's like, oh, he's asleep already. Got one sentence into, performing, and he zonks out. And so they do go to the countryside, and here we also see the effects, sort of in a very minute scale, but what is going on across the larger, backdrop of Japan at the time, where families had to say goodbye to their sons. And, we saw some of this with some of the other Rakugo performers. Were leaving, the master's sort of apprenticeship and everything, going to war or going to take care of their families, whatever it was, moving and all that kind of stuff. And so you see the personal effects that it's having on the master's wife. And Bon finally speaks up. I was waiting to see how long it might take him if he was ever going to venture to actually speak to her along this line. But he says, you have to consider, for all intents and purposes, there may be a time where he doesn't come back. And we have to live for ourselves. We have lives of our own that we need to, sort of live up to. So don't starve yourself. Don't make yourself sick and weak and all these kinds of things. Live for the promise that he may return, but live even in spite of the lack of it, if, God forbid, that happens. And she does seem to take that to heart. She picks up the bowl and starts slurping down that soup again, and, or whatever it is, that broth. And so we see that Bon's own, level of inspiring others is translating and transcending just his performance art. I mean, it's common sense speak, but he was effective in putting that across. His concerns were raised, and she understood where he was coming from. I think maybe, for a woman who wasn't thrilled that all these young men would be taken in as apprentices, to the master and everything, I half wonder if she could look upon that advice from almost a maternal standpoint. Like, my son is trying to reach out to me and tell me how to take care of myself in a better way, you know. So that was very touching and meaningful. And then, of course, they have this great sequence where, you know, years are going by. If the war was in full swing, 1941 is the early portion of the episode. We hear what effectively sounds like a bomb drop, and this is probably to hallmark the Hiroshima bomb or Nagasaki bomb or both. The wartime coming to an end. So it's approximately 5-6 years later that the entire rest of this journey for Bon and the Master's wife and everything, not hearing from them after a time, had taken place. And then just out of the blue one day, here they are again. Like, it's so heavenly in a sense, this, you know, gratification to know they're all right. They went out to perform for the troops. They're actually in army fatigues and everything like that. I don't know if there was any fighting involved for them, or if they were strictly performers, you know, for sort of the greater good for the soldiers at war and everything like that. But they're back. And the hug, the embrace between Shin and Bon in that moment, and the playful dialogue between them, oh man, you stink, oh, you smell too sweet, and everything like that. I'm giving you coins, go take a shower. You know, I was so elated with that. Not that I didn't expect that was how it was going to play out, but there was some small part of my, you know, psyche that was like, well, is this where things turn sour? You know, is this where Shin is lost? But I figured, no, it must be something that happens much later, and there's going to be much more depth and exploration of that dynamic between them. And then it becomes the story of a girl all over again. You know, and in between times, really, I mean, during that period, of course, we saw that Bon had made another sort of relationship with this other girl, and he just kind of has to leave her when everything is said and done. The war is done. They can go back home to Tokyo and everything like that. But then we have Miyokichi, who is all legs and all, you know, red blouse and purple polka dotted hairband and sunglasses, looking all kinds of, at least the female equivalent of pimp. You know, looking like a classy dame from a noir story. And she's just like, is Master Yakumo here? Tell him it's Miyokichi. He'll know what it means. You know? And so it's like, whoa, this just took an interesting turn. Is this going to actually be, you know, sort of more befitting of that cliche idea of Bon and Shin erupting over a woman or something like that, you know? I don't know. And I'm absolutely just dying to find out. I'm dying to find out who this woman is how she knows Yakumo. Is this like his kid, or is it a wannabe apprentice, you know, something like that? Is she going to be playing off of, because she seems sly, you know, is she going to be playing Bon and Shin, you know, off against each other, something like that, getting in between them, whether purposefully or inadvertently, and all that kind of stuff. I'm really fascinated and just thoroughly engrossed to find out what more happens. And I really love that sense of this being a story that is being told to us, much in the same vein as it's being told in the modern sense of the series by the modern Yakumo to Yotaro and everything like that. It feels very heartwarming, and it's kind of like, you know, it gives me the sensation of like being enraptured by stories of your grandfather, calling back on his youth, war times, how he met your grandmother, all this kind of stuff by firelight, the warmth and the hearth and all that kind of stuff. Like, this series just gives me that sensation from the backdrop, from the animation, from the characterization, the story itself, and the pacing, all of it. It's just absolutely pitch perfect. I can say no more superlatives about it. I just love it. And I really, as I say, can't wait to see where this goes from here, especially with, you know, Miyokichi. Like, what involvement is she going to have with her debut now in the story, and how she affects Bon and Shin, and how she knows, you know, the past Yakumo and everything. Just fun times ahead, feels like to me. And so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 3 of Shouwa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu, if you enjoyed it as much as I did, if you're being, you know, just be filled with the awesome sauce of the series as I am, you know, love it or hate it. Anything goes in the comments below. Love hearing from you guys and having that conversation. But I just can't say enough good things about it. And bring on the next one. So, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.